This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Ziak and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. Join the union to vote on albums, pick one to discuss with us on the show, get access to bonus episodes, and our private Discord community. Keep the podcast ad-free and make the next episode happen by joining us at digmeoutpodcast.com. We're back with, this is our final poll for 2025. It's our Christmas poll, if you will. It has red and white wrapped around it for the holiday season. We're doing our, I guess this is our November poll, our final poll of, or is it our early December poll? I don't know which one it is. I guess, no, it's only December 6th. So it's got to be our November poll, which we are doing in December. And like always, we got 4 albums suggested to us via digmeoutpodcast.com. Anyone can suggest. Feel free to go there, throw an album in. You never know what's going to win. And in this instance, we had 4 records, 2 of which I knew the names of the bands, and I knew songs by them, and 2 I didn't. What about you, Jay? Did you know any of these bands, or at least recognize names?
Give me the bands.
We have Kiss of Life by Gene Loves Jezebel.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah, me too.
Single.
Yes. McIntyre, Treadmore, and Davitt by Half Man, Half Biscuit.
God, no.
No, me neither. Each Finger by Insane Jane.
Nope.
No. And Star by Belly.
Yes.
Yes. So like you, 50% were known and 50% were unknown. I should mention that these were suggested by Keith Miller suggested Gene Loves Jezebel. Patrick Testa suggested Half Man, Half Biscuit. Eric Peterson suggested Insane Jane, and Bob Ramakers suggested Belly. From we had polls over both at Patreon and digmeoutpodcast.com. They are then combined to do one super poll, which Jay uses our AI learning language learning machine to combine 2 polls into one. We have Claude on it.
Complicated math.
Yeah, super complicated math that Jay and I were not fans of in school. Let's just put it that way. But those where's the final votes for that? Okay, here we go. So with the totality of both votes or polls combined, this was our results. In 4th place with 6.7% of the vote, Half Man, Half Biscuit. 3rd place with 16.7%, Insane Jane. In 2nd place, Kiss of Life by Gene Loves Jezebel with 36.7%. And in 1st place with 40%, Belly and Star. Jay, had you ever listened to any Belly, or do you own any Belly albums?
I do not own any Belly albums. Tanya Donnelly, yes. Heard the single off this record,
which of course is Feed the Tree.
But I don't think I've listened to any of the albums. Maybe briefly. But I mean, I kind of know the sound, but not super familiar with the catalog or any of the albums. How about you?
Same. I think I did like a deep dive at one point back when we did her solo album, or when we did Throwing Muses, because she was in Throwing Muses at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the MP3s on my computer for every Belly release, including like EPs and stuff. So I must have been on the LimeWire back then or something to grab all those. But I had never listened to a complete Belly album and like remembered everything and stuff. So going into this, It was basically like listening to a new record. As I just mentioned, this was the debut studio album by Belly. Tanya Donnelly, well, actually, she had been in the Breeders before this. So we've covered Tanya Donnelly in basically 3 times before this.
Wow.
She was in
I didn't
Throwing
know she was in the
Muses.
Breeders.
Yep.
Did I know that? I guess I didn't know that.
She's on the Safari. Well, no, I'm sorry. In verbiage, I guess. Not in terms of playing. She was with the Breeders for the Safari EP, but then and she was doing Throwing Muses at the same time, but then she quit both bands before the first Breeders album came out, and she was replaced by I don't know who was in it after Tanya Down. Oh, well, Kelly Deal then joined. So Kim was originally in Boston with Tanya Donnelly, Josephine Wiggs, and Britt Walford, because she was in the Pixies. And then I don't know if she relocated the band back to Dayton or where she was, but then she brought her sister Kelly in. And that's when you get the lineup that we know with Josephine Wiggs. And then Jim McPherson, the drummer, joined the band. Jim McPherson's kind of been the drummer always, not always. He was out for a little while in the late 90s, early 2000s. But it's basically always been Kim and Kelly after that. And then Josephine Wiggs has been out and then back in. So right now, the Breeders that exist at this moment in time is I guess you'd say the classic lineup of the Breeders. Okay. Now, as far as Throwing Muses goes with Tanya Donnelly, I believe that she played on, so we did the Real Ramona, and I think that might be the last album with Tanya Donnelly. I don't think she's on Red Heaven, which is the 92 album that comes out. So Belly, which comes out in 93 on Sire Reprise in North America, 4AD in the rest of the world. It was co-produced by Gil Norton, who again is one of the people that worked with the Pixies and Throwing Muses and all of these 4AD bands and lots of artists of this era. The lineup for Belly on this album is Tanya Donnelly on vocals and guitar, Fred Abong on bass, Chris Gorman on drums and percussion, and Thomas Gorman on guitar and organ, with additional musician Chuck Graining on guitar, slide guitar, and vocals. You know Chuck from Scarce, which was a band connected to Throwing Muses because of their location, I believe. So we got a lot of connections to previous episodes.
She's like the Kevin Bacon of indie
she kind of is. Well, and then recently she did recordings with our friend Aaron Perino of the Sheila Divine. They did duet songs together they did Aaron and the Lord song on his Aaron and the Lord project. And she's worked with a lot of people. I think she's done stuff with Bill Janovitz of Buffalo Tom. A lot of collaboration.
Is she working with Brian Futter?
Yes.
Doesn't he have a new project?
And she's
with her?
I believe that's correct too. She's also working now with Brian Futter of Catherine Wheel on a new project that's going to be coming out next year. I don't remember what that's called. I have to look that up. But
yeah, I'm anxious to hear what that sounds like.
Yeah, me too. Because obviously she has a connection to Catherine Wheel because she sang on Judy Staring at the Sun on the Happy Days album. So this album, as mentioned, came out in January. February 2nd in the US in 1993, 1 week earlier in the UK. There were 4 singles released. Gepetto was actually the first single released in November. That was the pre-released single. And then as the album was released, or just before the album released, Feed the Tree was the single that was released in January of 93. Full Moon, Empty Heart was released as a single, as also Slow Dog. And Feed the Tree, I remember there was a music video. It made it into the Modern Tracks charts. It did all sorts of, radio and video promotion. It ended up going gold in the US. It made it to number one on the U.S. Heatseekers albums chart.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Huh.
Made it to number 59 on the overall U.S. Billboard 200. I
I
had
mean,
no
Feed the
idea.
Tree was pretty hot, so maybe
Mhm.
that drove it.
Plus, you have to imagine, this is a person who has connections to a lot of underground bands that has the backing of a lot of big labels now. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like this was probably they were like, this is the push now. So, and it will, and she had been around, so this has uh, a lot of people are connected in the way that like um, when Juliana Hatfield's first record came out that broke, she had been in the Blake Babies, she had done the Juliana Hatfield 3, and then the Juliana Hatfield album that broke through. It was like, okay, this is her moment. Like, this is when it's finally going to happen.
Yep.
Didn't really, but same thing, kind of. Uh, let's get into some comments from our patrons. They said this. Scott Witt said, well, he said, I want to say Half Man, Half Biscuit just to hear you guys having to pronounce their name over and over again. Half Man Hales Biscuit? No, Half Man, Half Biscuit. He just left off the F there. But he went with Belly because he loves the whole Muses family tree. Pun intended. Muses family tree. I don't know what the pun is there. Jim Copany said, I love Belly, but would be far more interested in a discussion about King, which is the follow-up record. So Gene Loves Jezebel gets my vote. Gavin said, what a great quartet. And yet when I first saw them, I thought the opposite, mainly due to the band names. I voted Gene Loves Jezebel very narrowly ahead of Half Man, Half Biscuit, despite them sounding like a cross between McCluskey and Carter USM, as the album was far more consistent. Keith Tasker said, being an Atlanta native, it has to be Insane Jane all the way, even though I did see Gene Loves Jezebel on that tour at the Masquerade. Insane Jane were a staple of the club scene of the early 90s in Atlanta and Athens and captured raw punk and blues-inspired underground's Athens, Atlanta sound. They're absolutely a blast live and should have been bigger than Kurt and Co. A roundtable of that scene with Jane, Ellen, James, Society, 5-8, Frank, a whole bunch of bands that I don't know, is in order. Plus, I can't vote for Belly when the nomination fails to mention Throwing Muses. Well, I mean, we've already talked about Throwing Muses. We don't have to talk about them again. We've done all we had to do.
Right.
Well, this because in the I guess Bob's submission, or did you write this, Jay? Did you write the submission paragraphs?
It's based on Bob's.
It's based on Bob's. So yeah, it didn't mention Throwing Muses. We don't have to look to the past to see the future. I don't know what that means. That sounds ridiculous, actually. Actually, sounds like the opposite. You should know the past. And then over at digmeoutpodcast.com, Joe Rowland said, normally I'd vote for Gene Loves Jezebel, and this album does contain their biggest U.S. hit in Jealous, as well as being the first album after the Twins split, with Jay Aston retaining the name while his brother Michael went solo to form Edith Grove. However, you had to throw Belly into the mix, which I also like, who will probably win the round with ease. It wasn't with ease. I mean, the top two were tussling for the final vote.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, this is a case where I think at a glance, there's a perception that the most popular band is always going to win. And, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And often it's a closer race than I think anybody expects. So
sometimes we get Icon, and we don't even know
what
to do. That's our forever fallback. Yeah, but Icon. Let's talk about what works on this record. Jay, tell me something that works for you on Belly by King. By King.
By King.
No, sorry. Back it up. Star by Belly.
There you go. Yeah, I think the sound here is definitely unique, identifiable. It's the combination of these fuzzy but melodic guitars and then the vocal. I think the vocal above anything else is, very distinct. from a sound standpoint, musically, it's pretty guitar driven. We got a mix of kind of classic sounding picked parts, that could almost sound like anybody, but then there's some choices there that are interesting, some tones that are interesting, but then they mix it up with, melodic lines, and leads, some chord sections. So there's a good mix of different, kind of approaches for her to sing over. There's some stuff that, the picking of that is kind of a 6/8 ballad feel. It could be like a 60s style ballad, it's very traditional sounding.
That was some hurricane rode in on the back of a heart attack. Made a mistake on the fire escape in San Francisco. Worked my way back in a hallway in LA. Put on your black dress, throw on your back. Too long, too late.
But then you get these songs that are slightly quirky, kind of post-punk indie, as well. I guess Slow Dog would be a good example of that. Something like Stay sounds more like the 60s ballad. Then you got melodic sections that have a little bit more energy, which I was gravitating to. Dusted reminded me a bit of maybe like The Cult in terms of like musically what's going on there, how strong the guitar lines are. Obviously, Feed the Tree, the way the bass and the guitar are working together there to create melody, and to just give it some energy, some drive. It's got a little oomph to it. Um, the tones are pretty distinct too. There's some fuzzy stuff. Um, you hear a little distortion even on the bass here and there. But then also they layer in some chimey kind of things, which I think is smart in terms of filling out the mix. For her vocal to kind of sit in. So, tone wise, it just has a very, I think, unique sound. And then, getting into the vocal a bit more, there's just a lot of personality. It's very expressive style singing. There's a good amount of range there. She does a lot of like kind of breathy high stuff, but also there's that tone to it. It's not just all throaty. There's a little vibrato mixed in there. You're getting a lot of character from the way she's singing. The harmonies are mixed in to keep things interesting. Not only emphasize the hook, but there's also just like some things they do that kind of pull you into the mix a bit. Just the way they're doing the backup vocals and kind of creating some atmosphere. They're not all just straight harmonies. That was kind of interesting. And then, there's just overall, I think, a good amount of range on this in terms of vocals. You've got stuff that can be very intimate and folky, kind of draw you in. But there's also things on here where it's belting because it's got to get over top of loud, rock band. So, it's giving you a full spectrum here in terms of, emotion and dynamics and even in terms of the overall material. Like I said, there's stuff on here that can sound very, kind of restrained and simple, sometimes even folky. But then there's other things where it gets kind of quirky and weird and, a little bit out there and pushing the boundary. So there's a good amount of range musically, but then also she can, I think, vocally cover all that, which is pretty remarkable without ever sounding like strained or out of place or, not in a comfortable spot. It always feels like comfortable who she is, what the sound of the band is. So that's what worked for me. It's a unique, remarkable sound. I don't think that, a whole lot of bands come close to. What worked for you?
Well, I was a little caught off guard. I obviously knew Feed the Tree and Gepetto, which are these very like kind of Gepetto's more jangly. It has this lightness to it. Feed the Tree has a little bit more of like I guess you'd say a straight up alternative rock sound.
Yeah.
But the record overall is much more diverse than that. There's a lot of like sort of dreamy pop sound to this record, a lot of like murkiness that I think works really well with her vocal, because her vocal sort of like rests above this weird murky, like Low Red Moon has some organ on it that gives it a interesting texture. There's a nice shift on the record. You get like, the opener is like not a dirge, but it's a very delicate picked guitar thing. And then the next song, Angel, is where you get almost a UK dream pop shoegaze, very light shoegaze sound. Makes perfect sense. This is the world that they were a part of, the 4AD world of Lush and all those bands. And this record has that vibe. Like if you had told me that this was a British band and I didn't know anything about Belly, and you're like, oh, this was a British band around the same time as Lush and the Charlatans and that kind of stuff, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily sound like an American alternative record. And like you said, and I didn't even realize it, and now I hear it now, there are touches of like 60s elements happening.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to the Throwing Muses record that we listened to, there's the song Not Too Soon that she sings lead on. And if you remember, it has like Phil Spector drums in it. It's like boom, 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 tsh, boom,
yeah.
boom, boom. And I always thought like that's a weird drum beat for an alternative rock album from 1990 to use like a Supremes or a Martha and the Vandellas style drum. But then listening to this and hearing even more of it, I'm going, oh, okay, I see that, like that's part of her style, like rhythmically, the way she's writing the chord progressions and stuff. And because most of this is just her. She has a co-write on White Belly and that's it. So she's writing all these songs. Now, as far as like, I don't know if she's telling the drummer, like, play like, like on Reflections by the Supremes, or if she's leaving that to them. But there is there's a voice to this record that I didn't really realize until hearing it in totality. So it was an interesting listen in that respect. There's so much more nuance, which is probably why this only went to gold, I'm guessing, because it's not a instantly gratifying album in a lot of ways. You have to like sit with it, let those chimey guitars and those sometimes, like 6/8 rhythms and things that are on the slower end. It's not as blatantly alternative as maybe Feed the Tree makes you think. Because that Feed the Tree riff is really cool. I don't know if you figured it out on guitar, but it's a weird riff. It's not like they're playing just like an E minor and a G or something like that. The guitar is playing notes that you would, if you were to play them alone and not in conjunction with the bass, you'd be like, that sounds ugly.
Yeah.
But when the bass adds like the correct note on the bottom end, and then it all works together. So it's very complementary in that way, which is something that really good songwriters can do. They can hear the whole song and compose the whole song, so that the weird parts work each other out. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that worked for me. I think this is a very strong debut record from someone who knew what they were doing, essentially. Like they were not, an 18-year-old getting signed to their first deal and throwing them in with a producer and seeing what happens. Like they have years and years and years with multiple bands, and you can really hear that, which is a very cool thing. Actually, it was Thomas Gorman who played the organ, not Chuck Graining, but whatever. Point stands.
Yeah, the sound of the band sounds focused, like they know she knows what she wants it to sound like. They're not trying to still figure it out, and that comes across vocally too.
I did like that she played with lengths of songs, which, being very delicate, if that had gone on for like 4 minutes, I probably would have gotten very bored with it. The fact that it's only a minute 35, or the fact that Star is only 127, you choose to do that guitar with that like big echoey reverby sound. Yeah, I don't want to hear that for too long. It's change it up a little bit, but 127, totally cool with that. So I like that this is a thought out album in that respect. Is there anything that doesn't work for you on the album?
Well, I don't know if it's just the familiarity with Feed the Tree, but to me, that really distinguishes itself, and just how, like, it's another level of songwriting and also sophistication. Like you called out, the way the guitar part and the bass part work together in that don't quite happen again on the record. There's things that are kind of similar, but not to that level. Like it's just a notch up in terms of quality, creativity, just cohesion, folk, even the way she sings in that. Like I'm complimenting her vocals across the whole record, but on that song, again, it's just another level up. Like she's singing in this very kind of relaxed, deeper tone. There's less harmonies in it. It just feels more like even more focused, more refined. Songwriting wise, it's sharp, super sharp. And I feel like the rest of the record is a bit of a roller coaster in terms of that. So once you, I think, hear that quality, then I'm wanting to hear that through the rest of the record. And I think the rest of the record, it's a notch down, and sometimes 3 notches down, in terms of them being able to get back to that place. And that means like how the parts fit together. Really, I think mostly the songwriting, just consistently finding melodic hooks, refining them, working them, grabbing you, keeping you engaged. It's just, I think, just not a consistent record from that standpoint. 50 minutes is probably pushing it and making that more challenging for them as well. So I think it's a roller coaster ride for me of like, oh, I like this. Oh, this is kind of losing me. Oh, I like that. And this is losing me. So I find myself tuning out for a song and then compelled by a couple songs, and then another song, I'll like parts of it, and then I'll get bored with it. And then the next song I really like a lot. The next one I won't like, it's really just hit and miss for me, I think, on this record. on stuff that's working. Obviously, I think I'm tending to gravitate to things that got a little bit more uh stronger melodies, tighter songwriting, um, maybe a bit more up tempo. Even though there's a couple slower songs on here I do like, but the tempo certainly helps. I think there's some stuff on here where the rhythms get a little bit folky, jangly, stilted. That become a bit challenging. So I think it's just inconsistency for me with the songwriting, and a lot of that has to do with once you hear "Feed the Tree," right, you know what the band's capable of, and then everything else is sort of, to me, evaluated against that bar. I think the last thing would just be the production is also a little hit and miss here. Portions of it I think are great. Other portions of it sound kind of sterile, overly sterile, or even brittle. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if it's just drum tones or some of the guitar things going on, or just needs to be remastered. I'm not quite sure, but there was just parts of it where I just wanted it to be a little more warm and, I don't know, moody or organic. And it sounds a little mechanical, in a weird way. So that was also, I think, between that and the songs were causing me to fade in and out. So that's kind of what didn't work for me. How about you? Anything?
I do not like the track listing or the runtime. And I know that that's a common thing that we say with regards to albums, but this doesn't need to be 51 minutes. I think that it's sequenced completely wrong. I actually made my own sequencing.
Oh, okay.
I like the opener, Someone to Die For. It should immediately go into Feed the Tree. That punch would be perfect. Then you can cool it down, as Rob Gordon would say. You cool it down. You can go with Slow Dog next. Just to bring it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Then I like Full Moon, Empty Heart as number 4. Gepetto is number 5. That's your halfway point. It's this cheery, jangle pop song halfway through the record. Then I'm doing Angel, Dusted, Sad Dress, and Untogether. That's my album. I'm cutting 6 songs off of this thing. I'm making it like 38 minutes. And that to me is a tight, interesting. It's got a lot of different tones. It's got her vocals in different places. But the slower stuff to me blended together.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't tell where on the record, like, where am I? What is this song?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was the disappointing part. Even though I liked what they sounded like, it was just the songs themselves just didn't stand up. Like you said, like Feed the Tree. I mean, she covers like probably, in terms of vocal types, you got the lower end, this old man, in the verses. And then she does that really nice, it like raises in the pre-chorus. And then it's got an amazing chorus. You could not forget that hook. It's mind-boggling to me that wasn't a bigger single. I mean, I just think that that's a fantastic song. Maybe 93 was too early. Maybe if this had come out the year of Alanis, it would have been a million seller instead of a 500,000 seller. But I don't think the record itself overall is up to that single in terms of the melodies and in terms of the hooks.
Yeah, I felt like, I was very familiar with the single. I heard it a ton on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
But I struggle to find another song on here that raises to that level. I don't think it's Gepetto. I was kind of surprised that was the first single. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I was surprised
I would
too.
probably be more like Angel or Dusted or. I think the chorus of Slow Dog is really strong. The verses are challenging. They're just kind of very strange and quirky.
Yeah.
It's just hard to find a consistent, sub 4 minute tune on here that would be as high quality single as Feed the Tree.
Agreed. And I think that this was kind of a similar complaint I had about that Throwing Muses album, The Real Ramona, is that Not Too Soon is such a great single. super catchy, weird, but super catchy. Her vocals on it are amazing. And then the rest of the record between her and Kristen Hirsch, like they're fine songs, but they don't reach that pinnacle that Not Too Soon does, which, that happens a lot where a band, especially indie rock bands that aren't necessarily trying to write killer singles at this time, we're just trying to make records. Sometimes the big single's a fluke. Like, it's I'm not saying it's their cherry pie, but it's in this, it's in that vein. We're oh, wow, we wrote something really catchy here.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of this would be, if that wasn't on this album, it would be an interesting record.
Yeah.
I wonder if my perception of it would be different if it didn't have that killer single.
Me too. It's right in the middle too.
Yeah.
It's just like, it just sets the bar for the whole rest of the record. Once you hear it, you're like, oh shit, okay, this is what the band is capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got to go back and reevaluate the first half, and now the second half is got to meet this bar, which is hard.
Right. It's very similar to when I listened to the Funk Junkies album Injected and their cover of I Love It Loud by Kiss. And then I was very disappointed in the rest of the record.
Not what I was thinking, but okay.
Just, I have to throw in a Funk Junkies reference every once in a while.
And it's not like, there's plenty of bands in the 90s, I think, where, the single is so different than the rest of the record. You can kind of see why people, the rest of the record didn't sell. I think the rest of the material, it's in the ballpark, but I think if you have a discerning ear, or even if you don't, if you're just like attracted to the, pop sensibilities of that song, you're just not going to quite get there with the rest of the material.
Yeah, I agree.
You won't hate it. You'll just be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
If you're coming here for the single, I mean.
So where are you landing on this record? Were the album better EP or decent single?
Your sequencing case is compelling. Outside of being able to experience it that way, I would say a safer route for me would be EP.
Okay.
But it's pretty good EP. I got Angel, Dusted, Slow Dog, Low Red Moon, Feed the Tree, White Belly, Star, Stay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, I have 7 or 8 songs on here of the 15, so probably half the record at least. That I think would, get to the point. I mean, honestly, you're still probably pushing 36 minutes at that point, maybe close to 40, which, to me feels like a better place for this band, especially once you like clue into the 60s influences, which I think are, as you experience the record, we both have talked about them where they kind of pop. You're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see where that's coming from. Like, that's like a psych rock song, or that's like a 60s ballad, or to me that even like makes pushing me like, well, make a 60s kind of style album then, right? Make it vinyl length and that kind of sequencing experience, and just conceptually would have been an interesting way to approach this. Yeah. So yeah, EP for me. How about you?
Well, like I said, I got a 9-song album that I can cut this down to, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. So I'm going to go where the album, obviously, I think there's an asterisk with there because I'm cutting 6 songs of the original.
I mean, you're kind of in the same place that I am then.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty close.
What's interesting is the follow-up album actually charted higher on the albums chart, but didn't sell as well, which is, I can't figure that out exactly. But Glyn Johns was the producer on that one. So they had Gil Norton and Glyn Johns back to back.
Yeah. And there's, I'm sure, a lot of optimism because of Feed the Tree, I don't know the timing when that was released, but I remember patterns where like, the big single would be the last single they release, and then they go in for the next record, and there's a lot of optimism that, this next record is going to be like the successful single from the prior, and it just doesn't work out that way.
And their touring mates for their second album, King, in 1995, were Catherine Wheel. They opened for Catherine Wheel, which made sense because then Tanya could come out and do Judy Staring at the Sun with them.
Wow.
On tour. I am sad I didn't see that tour.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
That would have been awesome.
So that would have been Yeah, they're both 95.
Yeah. And then Belly broke up the following year in 96 and then reunited in the 2010s to do a new record. They did Dove. After reforming in 2016, they did a crowdsourcing to fund Dove. And that came out in 2018. And that's it from them. Tanya's been doing lots of other stuff with other projects, like we've mentioned, and whatnot. So that's a better EP for Jay and a worthy album for me, although I think we're pretty close on our picks. And if you would like to chime in on this, you can go right ahead over to any of our various complaint departments at digmeoutpodcast.com or Patreon. Maybe you'll bring praise, but if you have a disagreement with us, feel free to let us know. If this episode, however, brought back good memories and positive vibes, feel free to join us at Dig Me Out Podcast to
Slom.
digmeoutpodcast.com, which is where you'll find the Tanya Donnelly Love Songs for Underdogs review.
I think we both love that album, right?
Love that record. Great record. And the Throwing Muses Rear Ramona record that we reviewed many, 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 many centuries ago, back in like the late 1900s. We reviewed that record. And I'm sure there are even more. And then we've done the Breeders' first album, which again, she didn't play on, but she was a part of the band before that. So there's a lot of, in the Tanya Donnelly connected universe, we've hit a lot. And Scarce. We've talked about Scarce as well. So if you would like to access those, they're a part of our 800 episodes in our archive, along with history of the band posts and new release roundups. If you would like more, paid subscribers unlock bonus podcast episodes covering 70s, 80s, and aughts rock, new release reviews, and access to our private Discord community. That's digmeoutpodcast.com. And while you're there, suggest an album you think deserves to be featured on a future episode of Dig Me Out. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.